Okay, so hi, welcome everyone to the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy. I am Vanessa Wang, and today Fresh Left White is joining us with the teaching of loving ourselves toward freedom. Thanks for joining us. A big shout out to everyone in this community who keeps showing up to be a Sangha. Our academy teachers are practicing generosity in action, and we are incredibly fortunate to have their teachings to help us in our recovery efforts. If you would like to help support the Buddhist Recovery Network, our academy, and our teachers, we invite you to give dana, whether on a one-time or recurring basis. And let me copy the link of donation. I will do this after the intro. Please be sure to indicate that your donation is for the Academy, and we sincerely thank you for your dana and for showing up today.
Over here. Hi, nice to meet everyone. Greetings. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for holding the space and helping set us up. My name is Fresh Lev White. I go by Fresh or Lev, whichever works. I've been going by Lev for about 3 years, and so either is fine with me. My pronouns are he and they, and I'm currently actually on Mansi Lenape land. So I'm in Tarryton, New York, and I'll share a little bit about what I'm doing up here in a moment. And so we'll talk a bit about loving ourselves towards freedom. And I'm, putting in my head like, okay, I've got 55 minutes. I'm used to having a lot more time. And one of the things that I like to do is breakouts in the beginning to have you introduce yourselves. So we'll do that in the chat instead, since we don't have a lot of time. And what I'm going to ask you to do is first, just check your toes. Just check your toes if that's accessible. Check your fingers. Maybe exhale for a moment and allow yourself to be held by the planet. It hasn't rejected us yet. So just allow ourselves to sink in. We spend a lot of time like this, I'm like this, and there's this big fat planet just wanting to give us hugs. So what I'd like you to do in the chat is say hello if you'd like. And of course, I heard Vanessa was giving some instructions. It's different depending on if your phone, iPad, computer. So you can find your chat. And in the chat, maybe say 1 or 2 words. You might say hello if you'd like to say hello to your other Sangha members. And we'll have more time to talk later. Maybe 1 or 2 words about how you're feeling in this moment. Just sort of airing. And the term that I like to use is sort of what's on your heart. And I know it's hard to do that in 1 or 2 words, but we've got a hi from Denise. So what's on my heart right now? It's just a little nervousness. I'm in a hotel room. I'm used to being at home. And so just a little nervousness around that. But what's on your heart? Some people have stress, and then take a time to look. I'll try to read them. People are feeling exhausted and hopeful, or hopeful. So there's stress and hope in one place, in one body. People are feeling unsettled, surrendered and free. Oh yeah, that's my friend Bernie. I'll tell you about him in a moment. People are feeling sad, and thanks for saying where you are. Sad in Baltimore, sorry to hear that. Pat is grateful. Michael's sober and serene. Congratulations, Michael. So a little bit about me. This background is the East Bay Meditation Center. No, Bernie does not live there, but we created this meme when it was meme time, and I needed a background, and this seemed to work for me today. I've been part of the community at the East Bay Meditation Center since maybe, I would say 2008, 2009. and began teaching teens in 2013. I've gone through the Spirit Rock Community Dharma Leadership Program and the Dedicated Practitioner Program. I recently finished Kristen Neff's self-compassion, mindful self-compassion program. And I would say, like, throughout my life, my I am statements are I am love and I am compassion. And so my work has been to extend that to myself as well as I've done for others when I wasn't being codependent, that is. So the other beautiful thing about working in recovery groups is the being able to remind people that the way that we showed up and responded and or may respond today was not our fault. We're responding to a system that that is not quite right, right? Buddha talks about, these conditions that were here before we came, and then the conditions that we come into. And some of us, in our rejection of that, in some ways caused harm to ourselves and others. So our practice is to awaken to the ways that we're causing harm to ourselves and others, and then making that choice to do something else. I'm just trying to figure out which way I want to go. I think, yeah, I'll start with that as an introduction, and let's practice for a few minutes. I want to offer, and I know you know this, I know you hear this, and after not watching the news for 3 weeks and turning it on, only the weather, the last couple of days, I know there's a lot going on. And then there's what's happening personally. So a reminder that this is a practice, that we wander and we begin again. And if we can do that with kindness, we'll be able to wander a little bit less often. But the point is to simply be here with what is, with as much kindness as possible. So we'll do a 15-minute practice. I don't have all my setup, but we're going to make this work. Of course, you can practice sitting, standing, lying down. You can practice with your screen on or your screen off. And we'll begin with 1 bell, and then I'll ring 3 bells in the end. And I'm just going to do a little bit of guidance because the period is so short. So settling in, whether for you that's your breath, the sensations in your body, or the practice of hearing without listening or clinging. At any time, including now, placing your hand on your heart if that's something that might be soothing, placing your hand on your belly or both. Hands down on your lap can support grounding. And for those who need movement, walking is available. Tapping the outside of your thighs is available. You simply want to be in the moment. In each moment, returning with kindness.
No, I'll watch it. Oh, come on.
Gently coming back to this moment. Just this breath and this body. Just settling into your breath. We still have a few more minutes. Easing back. Letting go. A few more minutes, just being in the moment. And as we prepare to come back, perhaps taking a moment to honor yourself for this time of practice. Understanding there is no good practice or bad practice, just practicing. Exhaling again and allowing your body to be held by the planet. You might, if it's available to you, consider offering out thanks to other people who helped create the space here today. Just sending a little kindness, gratitude. And as I ring the bell, you might consider offering thanks for the origins of the practice from the Buddha, the Dharma, and all the tools that allow us to practice with ourselves in kind and loving ways. And again, for the Sangha, the community, those in this space and those globally. So I thank you for your practice and your presence. Sorry about the little disturbance there. So in order to leave time for questions, first I want to offer just a little stretch and movement, like our bodies are supposed to be moving. So if it feels good to stand up for a moment, that's great. Moving your head to side, maybe shaking out your shoulders, your hands, coming back into this body and this other way of awareness. All right, I'll share some stories and hopefully offer some teachings. And I was, considering like, what is freedom, right? So it's a question for each of us. It's an individual question as well as one global question, right, for humanity. So I'll share my story and hopefully this will flow in a good way. That'll make some sense. And part of it, I came on and I talked about being nervous. And I flew here from, look at me, I can't even catch up. I flew here from Oakland on Tuesday, I left Tuesday night and left San Francisco on Tuesday night, or the Bay Area, a place that is currently unhealthy air quality, right? And we have that, and we have COVID. And so I have an autoimmune thing, so I'm a double masker. And one of the things I was looking forward to was arriving to an Airbnb here in New York. And I was coming to New York to meet my birth family for the first time. So I've got a little nervousness from flying for the first time in 19 months and going somewhere where I don't know where I'm going. And then, I don't really care about how people feel about the vaccine or not. Masking really makes me feel a little bit more secure. And and meeting the birth family. So I get here and I'm immediately greeted by someone without a mask and led into this apartment with this person who not only do they not have a mask, they're the greeter. They don't have a mask. They're like making themselves a pot of coffee, right? This is the Airbnb that I'm renting for the month. And in my mind, I'm double masked, but in my mind, my mind is starting to get agitated, right? In my community, we all wear masks. And so I'm concerned. Other issues come up around the Airbnb after this person leaves, and talk with some friends. And I decide I'm going to spend the night in a hotel till I figure it out. Hadn't slept. There was flight delays. We've all traveled, and things get a little crazy. So there's flight delays, and it's like 12 in the afternoon. I left 6 o'clock the night before, so I'm probably more agitated because I'm tired, and there's no food on the plane. So I get to this hotel, and it's a hotel that I had booked for the second half of this month, just in case I didn't find an Airbnb. So I figured I'd go check this out. So I go to this hotel, and I asked for a room in the back, and because I wanted it to be quiet. And the guy, I get upstairs, and he puts me in the front, like right above registration, where the parking lot is. But I'm so tired. I'm like, whatever, I'm gonna sleep. And then I have a meeting. I have a Zoom meeting with people on the West Coast. And when we get off the call, we have a blackout. Lights go out. I'm like trying to find my way downstairs to find out. Actually, I was downstairs because I decided after the meeting that I wanted some cookies. So I go downstairs to get cookies, and the lights go out. So I have to find my way back upstairs. And of course, now come all the fire trucks and everything, and they're right outside my window, and it's blaring. And for some reason, maybe giddiness, I don't know what, but I'm okay, right? I'm okay. I have a place. I'm watching the thunder and lightning, right? So I don't know if Ida came to meet me or I came to meet Ida, but we had our exchange. I'm watching the rain coming down, and I'm just glad to be indoors, right? So in my practice, I consider those who don't have shelter. This is just common for me. And so I'm in gratitude, a little giddy, because now I've had Oreo cookies in the dark, and I'm just playing with it. 5 a.m., fire alarm goes off, and we're like blaring. And it's like going down the hallway, and deep respect for the actual incident, but it was almost like the Titanic, where there's like people in the hallway and they're freaking out and they're running. And somehow I managed to be with all of this in relative equanimity. The one thing that was hard for me, there was a woman with a baby carriage who, once the alarm stopped, needed to get back in her room. And, they were limited staff, and I had to ask the manager several times. But for the most part, I was with equanimity. And I could not do that without my practice. I could not be calm and laughing, and I was connecting with people without this deeper understanding that I was in shelter, that ultimately the room locked, so I had security, and I had no idea what was going on in New York City. It didn't even cross my mind. So this is one of the conditions, right? These are conditions that came up. Don't mind me, I'm looking at notes. I don't always do that, but I decided to make some notes today because of time. So these are some of the conditions that come up, and our response is everything. And I wanted to just talk teeny bit about my recovery, which was, I got to this point in my life where I wanted to be a better person, whatever that means. And I decided to hire a coach, right? A professional coach to help me with my coaching work. But also this coach had experience working with people in AA. And I know very little about it. I knew very little about it at the time. I have a history of major drinking and drugs and things like that. I'm very fortunate to be here. Always a happy person, very fortunate in lots of ways, but still, it was the behaviors. So about a month later, a friend invites me to an Al-Anon meeting, but I didn't know it was an Al-Anon meeting. He says, I'm going to go talk at a meeting. And I remember showing up at this meeting, and he shares a story, and I'm saying to myself, wow, this is really interesting. I wonder what this is. And he's talking, and I'm like, it seems like an AA meeting. Maybe it is. I'm like, but he just had wine with me last week. I have no idea what's happening. And so it took me listening to a few stories of his, and then there was another speaker, and the other speaker talked about like taking 6 weeks to buy a desk. And it was the second speaker that, as he was talking, I remember thinking, oh my God, my older sister would benefit so much from this, right? And then he's speaking, and I think, oh, my younger sister, she really could get a lot out of this, right? I'm like in my stuff, right? And then finally, when he talks about the desk is when it hits me and I start having flashbacks. One of my favorite practices is Tara Brach has a practice called It's Not Your Fault. And I like to share that with people, particularly in recovery, also adoptees and other groups. And we come into this life that we have these conditions. And like I said, we come in, we see the world, and we think maybe it could be one way. Everybody's telling us that we're wrong. Everybody's maybe not listening to us, whatever the physical or emotional abuse that we experience. And we sometimes can take things in to try to soothe ourselves. I learned about, what was it? Not self-soothing, but self-medicating, sort of my experience. So we didn't create the conditions, and yet we took on all these compulsive behaviors. Some of them included substance abuse. Some of them included codependency, which was a big one of mine. And we also got this idea that we're powerless and that we're not free. And that condition is something that everybody experiences to a certain degree. We've been taught to look outside of ourselves. And I think for me, freedom is really understanding that I have a lot to do with creating the experiences that I have, including booking this Airbnb without getting advice from anyone in an area that I didn't really know a lot about. So it's not your fault, right? We've come into this world that's been intentionally in some ways set up to harm us. And I say that from a perspective of, or sharing, well, one example is that we have a global practice of re-traumatizing, certainly in this country. So re-traumatizing can look, for me, like not watching the news for 3 weeks and then wanting to see some of the floods. And I see them and I know that they're here and I know that they're present, but for some reason I keep going back to the news, right? I keep going back and watching another flood video, and I stop because I find out what I'm doing. But that's not freedom, right? That's me with my draw to be excited or to be in that trauma again and again. The other thing I wanted to share, so the other example I had is that if you go to Netflix, Amazon, or any of these TV things, you'll notice that most of what's on there are violence. But if the populace actually chose musicals, it would all be musicals. So just realizing that we're constantly creating. I spent a lot of time going back and forth for different reasons about, I don't want to go down that lane. That's a whole different story. But how do we practice the freedom that we have to choose who and how we want to be in each moment? One of the things that came up again for me, I'm like trying to cram in a lot at one time. I think about the precepts and this, so we have abstaining, I'm just offering these 5, it's different versions: abstaining from taking life, abstaining from taking things that are not giving, abstaining from sensuous misconduct, abstaining from false speech, and abstaining from intoxicants. And I want to go back to sensuous misconduct, as this idea of re-traumatizing ourselves through the media, or allowing ourselves to be re-traumatized by the media, and in fact seeking it out. And that we actually have the freedom to choose not to do that. Well, you have the privilege to not watch the media because of X, Y, and Z. And the truth is, of course, if there's something happening around you, you want to know what's happening. Generally speaking, when we're not in the situation, we can actually have choice to decide when we're going to step in and watch and when we're going to not. Otherwise, we will know if something's urgent is going to happen. The people around me are the ones that told me about New York City. I didn't see it, right? People around us will let us know. So taking and allowing that freedom to choose to decide where we're going to focus and what we're going to focus on. And I think I want to go back to the words sensuous. There's this subtle experience that we have when we're watching trauma on the news or whatever, that some of us notice and we've learned to ignore. We can know that it's going to cause us harm, but we've learned to bypass that and turn it on anyway. And how do we practice honoring those subtle feelings, the anxiety that begins to rise up when we know what's going to happen when we turn the channel? Mindfulness helps us, of course, to be aware of the subtle, not just the obvious, but the subtle turning away from being kind to turning towards trauma or being harmful. And we have the freedom to choose. I heard a quote yesterday in a service that said, or Saturday, Elul service that said, scratch the surface and the mystery awakes. And some of us know this experience that no matter where you are in your practice, that you begin to awaken to this knowing that peace is possible, that more peacefulness is possible in here, right? We can't always do we can't control everything out there, but we can control it in here. And what if we chose, as we do have the freedom to choose to dive in, go deeper. And I always want to encourage in community. Self-compassion helps us to begin again, right? So some of us, I've heard people say, I've been practicing for years and my mind is still like this. And so some of that is about what we're taking in, what we're feeding ourselves. So I know I'm sort of passively talking about the news, or not so passively, but the more violence we take in, the more trauma we take in, the more agitation we're going to have, the more agitation our mind's going to have. So being able to choose what is enough for you. And I heard this quote yesterday. Let's see. Self-compassion helps us begin with greater ease when the subtle energy shows up that causes ourselves harm. And it can take time. The conditioning for us to turn towards what's harmful is long and deep. Just really knowing that. I heard this quote yesterday. Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a large foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. So the question being, what does freedom mean to me? And how can I help myself participate or allow it more? That quote was from Rainier Maria Rilke. And I just want to, scratch the surface and the mystery awakes is from a friend named Raka.